Hi, David Moore with Equity Advantage, and I've got Robert Smith of Peregrine Private Capital here with me today, and we're talking about all kinds of fun stuff. But one of the things my dad used to say is anytime you knew anything about what you're reading about, you knew how wrong it was. And I think that today it's whether we're talking about the definition of a recession or what's happening with land rights or anything else, it's a little different world for the people that are in that space and understand it than what the general public is actually seeing and reading and hearing and understanding. So I guess what I put out there first off is if you're regular to this channel watching these presentations, if you've got questions on something we haven't addressed it, please reach out. And we try to give a variety of information, a variety of topics, and we want it to be things that are useful to you out there. And a lot of the stuff we deal with day in, day out, we don't really think that much about, so it gets to be second nature for us. But for the general public, you might have questions that you're not getting the answer to, or you think, gee, that doesn't sound right. Well, if it doesn't sound right to you, it probably isn't right. But if you've got an idea or you've got a question, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll address those things. And we try to give you some tools to get through this jungle of life today. But let's talk a little bit about what's not being talked about, Bob.
Well, that's one of the reasons, or no, actually, it's the principal reason why I enjoy these sessions so much, because they're not dry, they're not conventional, and I think David and I work very, very hard to talk about what's not being talked about, in terms of the marketplace, the economy, what's going on from a social standpoint. It should be obvious to all and sundry at this point that you're never going to get the real information from your government. You're never going to get the real information from the mainstream media, which long ago threw in the towel on journalism and is now largely propagandistic. So it's your responsibility to seek out alternative sources of information that you believe to be credible, that are willing and able to talk about what's not being talked about. Despite the fact that progressive governments up and down the West Coast have failed their citizens miserably from a lifestyle standpoint and from an economic standpoint, there's very little discussion about that in the mainstream media, how that is directly impacting income property owners, not only in terms of their income stream, but the potential valuations of their property. And not only are they not talking about it, but the last thing they're ever going to do is give you a solution or a possible solution to that problem in terms of how you can get out of this morass that they've created. And so that's what I find very compelling about these sessions, and why it may sometimes come off as a bit of a bitch session, because we want to try to talk about what's not being talked about and how you can defend yourself or protect yourself against that from an ownership standpoint. Because again, the times are changing, and they're not changing for the better. Arthur Laffer, and I don't think there's a more credible conservative economist alive, author of the eponymous Laffer curve, which Reaganomics was in large part predicated on: tax less, get more, and inspired a generation worth of economic growth. He says that he doesn't see anything good on the economic horizon for the United States, despite the fact that you've got the current administration and the popular media now parsing what really defines a recession. So you're clearly not these people are never going to admit the fact that they've created a horrendous mess. that is going to result in a lot of pain and a lot of wealth loss on the part of people to get out of. And so you've got to shoulder that responsibility for yourself in terms of, are there places I can go that are safe harbors? Are there better ways for me to protect myself from an asset ownership standpoint than just sitting on my property and keeping my fingers crossed and hope that my tax bill doesn't go up, or I don't get another call from the powers that be that we want to use your property, your asset for X, when indeed it was originally intended to be Y and Z. That's your responsibility, and that's what we try to communicate here. So I enjoy that.
I have a great time with it.
I have a great time.
And I mean, really, you're looking at diversification. You're looking at your ability to use what you've worked so hard to accumulate and keep it going, at least the most safe direction you perceive is out there. And so if we look at, once again, if somebody came to you, and you know, we didn't talk about this earlier, but I did mention that $30 million that rolled through. On the other hand, I mean, your floor is typically about $100,000, right? To go into one of your investments, and there are situations where you've got residual amounts that might be substantially less than that also. But if somebody, you know, back to the safe harbors and what you're looking at these days, if somebody came to you with, let's just say, $500,000, and you might have a situation where they have debt or they don't have debt. If they've got debt, you're going to sort of look at that and diversify that five. I mean, you're not going to stick it into one offering typically.
No, you can. I mean, that's, in today's environment, with as inflated as housing prices and real asset prices still are, you're going to have a hard time finding a single family home that's not a tear down on the West Coast for $500,000. So again, you're putting all your money in one place at one time, subject to the vagaries of economic and governmental fate. You can, with using the DST format, assuming you're an accredited investor, you can take that $500,000 and easily divide it up into $100,000 increments and diversify both functionally and geographically. And as unstable as things are now, we think diversification is your best friend against asset loss. And I'd like to emphasize, we think we're at a point in time because that more than a decade worth of free money is over, gone, dead, done, and it ain't coming back anytime soon. And so we think it's important for investors to flip off the how much more money can I make switch and flick on the how can I protect the money I already have switch. And given the ease of diversification with the DST format, it should be first on everyone's list, at least in terms of income property owners, as part of their defensive strategy. And even more, because you mentioned earlier, as real property, I mean, real property is tangible. It's not like a stock or a bond. And so there is a sense of permanence there. You can reach out, you can touch it, you can drive by it, you can walk through it. And that does give many people a profound and important sense of well-being. But at the same time, it shouldn't limit you, okay? Because capital is mobile. You have to know and believe that you can move your capital faster than the powers that be can tax it away from you, okay? And that's why there is this ongoing, accelerating migration of people, money, and business from high-tax blue states to no low-tax red states, okay? There is the economic bifurcation of the United States is accelerating, it's not slowing down. And that's because there are vehicles available to income property owners to move their capital and keep that a step in front of the progressive tax man or woman, as the case may be, that wants to take it away from you. And I think that realization that there are those structures or entities out there should be enormously emancipating to you as an income property owner, that I'm not stuck in one place and I don't just have to suck it up, grin and bear it. You can fight back and move your money. Okay?
With good people. So, with good people. Good tax and legal people, I think good tax people, I think the most important person in your life these days. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on. So my advice is, before you ever sell anything, talk to your tax people. Before you put it on the market, understand what your tax liability is. See if there's some other way to mitigate it. Maybe you have some losses elsewhere to offset the gains, so on and so forth. But use your tax people. Don't use them April 14th. Right? I mean, use them before a year's end. Talk to them about what's going on. But take advantage of the experts in your life, and if you don't have those people, get them there. And you're providing a great opportunity for people. You just have to understand what's going on. Usually, if there's a good side one place, there's a bad side another. For example, during COVID, we've had a number of clients, number of people we work with. Suddenly, they're working out of their home, and they talk to their tax people or their lawyer and says, "Hey, you ought to treat it as a home office." And so they do. So you've treated that home office now as a home office for more than the last 3 years. You sell your home, you've got to do an exchange on that piece of your house, okay? So usually if there's an upside one place, there's a downside somewhere else. And you've got to be aware of these things. We've talked about the exclusion with inflation. The 250 or 500 doesn't do anything for you these days. So move out of the house, convert it from a residence into investment. As long as you sell it within 3 and moving out, you can still take the exclusion and 1031 the overage into a DST. These things are all opportunities that are out there if you're working with people that will present these ideas to you. One comment I would make, and I purposely, asked Bob like the 500 number, because I don't want you to think you got to go into a DST, you got to have millions of dollars. You don't. I mean, it's a $100,000 floor typically. Right. But if you took 500 and put in your stuff, you put it into 5 different properties. The good side is you've got diversification across 5 different things. Could be 5 different regions, could be 5 different asset types. But just understand that 3, 4, 5. What's the biggest objection people have to DSTs is the hold time, right? So then if you short cycle it, people get upset once in a while too, because now they got to go find something else. But where I'm going with this is, you take that 5 and you break it into 5 at 1, the likelihood of all those 5 properties cycling at the same time is not there. So you just need to understand, work with people that have been through this and understand it. If you're working with Timmy down the street that just got licensed in security selling this stuff, Timmy doesn't have 20, 30, 40 years of time working with people that have done these things. So make sure you're working with people that have been through the good times, the bad times, understand the product, and it's not just a side trick, somebody that's really understands it. And that's why it's important that we do these videos and talk about these things. And so these are the things that people don't talk about. Okay, sure, you've got an upside. We, on the retirement side of our business, people will take an in-kind distribution of a property. Well, what does that mean? Well, at 59 and a half, you can start taking money out of your retirement account. At 72, you have to. 72, it's the RMD, Required Minimum Distribution, another acronym, right? But the deal is, you got to, and if you've talked to somebody in the Wall Street world, they'll say, well, gee, you shouldn't buy real estate with your IRA or 401k. What happens if you get the RMDs and you can't take it because you don't have any money? Well, it's a simple solution. You take an in-kind distribution. That's something people don't think about, and it's a new idea, but it's something our clients will do regularly. And with every good, there's a bad, right? So the good side is you can take an in-kind distribution. The bad side of that is you're incurring some tax liability without having the money to pay that tax obligation. So you got to get it somewhere else. Now, you go talk to Johnny down the street that's never been through this. Johnny tells you to do that, but doesn't talk to you about the negative side. That's where it's talking to the experts, talking to people that have been through this stuff. So it's not our first rodeo on this thing. And I always tell people, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. So if you've got a question, no matter how dumb you might think it is, ask the question and work with people that have been through this stuff and understand it inside out. And right now, whether we believe we're in a recession or not, depending on somebody's definition of it, you've got to look at the world and have some questions, and you want to make sure that you're working with investments, with things that have been through a bad time, not with somebody that's never been through a bad time. So if we're looking at different institutional offerings, make sure you're working with people that have been through these things and with companies that have been through them, because the likelihood of a company that's been through that fiasco of 07, 08, all that stuff, if they've been through it, they're probably going to be okay again. If they've never been through it, they've never seen a bad day, you got some potential problems there. So once again, David Moore with Equity Advantage with Robert Smith, Peregrine Private Capital. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bob, if they want to reach out and talk to you, how did they do that?
503-241-4949. We're there. Okay.
You know where to find them. You've got the questions. Reach out for the answers. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.